The Martin family was always known for their love of nature. Every chance they got, they would pack their bags, lace up their boots, and head off on a new adventure. Tom and Sarah Martin, along with their twin daughters, Emma and Ella, were happiest when surrounded by trees, rivers, and mountains. This time, they had planned a weekend trip to Pine Ridge Mountain, a place they had visited once before, but wanted to explore deeper. The weather had been perfect when they set off. The sky was a brilliant blue, the sun was shining, and there was just a hint of coolness in the air. They took a happy photo before their hike began, all smiles with the towering snow-capped mountain behind them. The girls wore colorful jackets and small backpacks filled with snacks and water, ready for the adventure ahead. They started their hike early, laughing and talking as they followed the well-worn trail. Other hikers who saw them remembered how cheerful and full of energy they seemed. Tom carried a map in his pocket, and Sarah kept a small compass clipped to her backpack, just in case. They were careful people, not ones to take silly risks. But as the afternoon wore on, the weather started to change. Dark clouds gathered over the peaks, and a chill wind swept through the trees. The Martins pressed on, hoping to reach their planned campsite before nightfall. No one knows exactly what happened next. By evening, they were gone. When they did not return the next day, a search was launched. Friends, park rangers, and volunteers combed the trails, shouting their names and checking every corner of the forest. Helicopters flew overhead, and dogs sniffed along the paths, but there was no trace of the Martin family. It was as if they had simply disappeared into the mountains. Days turned into weeks. The town grew somber, and the news spread across the country. How could an entire family vanish without a single clue? Some people whispered about wild animals. Others worried they had fallen into a hidden ravine or gotten lost in the thick woods. But there was no evidence to point to any one answer. The Martins' friends refused to give up hope. Every day, Sarah's sister, Lisa, visited the ranger station, asking for updates. The rangers shook their heads sadly. They had no news. It was the worst kind of mystery, the kind where hope slowly fades, leaving only questions behind. But just when everyone was beginning to believe the worst had happened, something incredible was found. It was a ranger named Mike who discovered the first clue. Mike had been checking the wildlife cameras spread throughout the park. These cameras were hidden high in trees or strapped to rocks, set up to capture photos of animals moving through the forest. Usually, the pictures showed deer, bears, or foxes. But this time, as Mike flipped through the images, he froze. There, in the middle of one photo, were 3 small figures walking through the trees. They were bundled in bright jackets, moving carefully over the snowy ground. Mike zoomed in. His heart raced as he realized it was Sarah, Emma, and Ella. Their clothes were dirty and they looked tired, but they were alive. Strangely, Tom was not in the picture. Mike immediately called his supervisor, and within hours, a new search team was organized. This time, they had a starting point, the location where the wildlife camera had captured the photo. Rangers and volunteers rushed to the spot, moving as quickly as they could. Snow was falling lightly now, covering old footprints and making the search even harder. Still, they pushed on, fueled by the hope that the Martins might still be found. As they combed the area, they found broken branches, a child's scarf caught on a bush, and small footprints leading deeper into the forest. Every sign pointed to the same thing. Sarah and the girls were alive and trying to find their way out. But the deeper the searchers went, the more they realized just how rough the mountains could be. The ground was steep and rocky, the trees thick and confusing. Even experienced hikers could get turned around easily. The rescue team knew they had to work fast before the cold night trapped the family again. Sarah hugged her daughters tightly as they moved slowly through the snow-covered forest. Her heart ached with every step, but she forced herself to keep going. They had been lost for days, surviving on melted snow and the few granola bars left in their backpacks. Tom had left them a few days earlier to look for help, promising he would come back soon. Every night, Sarah prayed he would find them. Every morning, she had to gather her strength to lead the girls forward. Emma, the quieter twin, clung to Sarah's hand, while Ella tried to be brave, scouting a few steps ahead. Sarah was so proud of them. They were only 6 years old, but they were strong and smart, just like she had taught them to be. She remembered Tom's last words before he left. Stay together. Keep moving. I'll find you. She clung to that hope with every breath. When they stumbled onto a small creek, Sarah decided to follow it downhill, thinking it might lead to help. The days blurred together. Sometimes they heard helicopters overhead, but the trees were too thick to signal. Once, they saw a bear in the distance and had to hide behind a fallen tree until it passed. Another time, a snowstorm forced them to huddle under a large rock for hours, shivering in their thin jackets. Through it all, Sarah kept telling the girls stories to keep their minds off the fear. She made up tales about magic forests and brave explorers who always found their way home. She refused to let them give up. One afternoon, when they were especially tired and hungry, Sarah noticed a strange clicking sound nearby. She looked around and spotted a small box attached to the tree. It was a wildlife camera. She realized then that someone would eventually check the cameras. Maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. She waved her arms and shouted, hoping the camera had caught them. That small moment of hope gave her the strength to keep going a little longer. She didn't know it yet, but her signal had been seen. Help was on the way. The rescue team moved quickly once they had the camera location. Following the footprints and broken branches, they covered miles of rough terrain. They were cold and exhausted, but they refused to give up. As night began to fall, they spotted a flash of red through the trees. A jacket. The team called out, and moments later, Sarah stumbled into view, holding Emma and Ella close. Tears streamed down her face as she realized they were safe at last. The girls cried too, both from relief and from the overwhelming feeling of being found. The rescuers wrapped them in warm blankets and gave them food and water. Sarah could barely talk, but she managed to ask one question. "Do you find Tom?" The rescuers shook their heads sadly. They hadn't found him yet. They promised Sarah they would keep looking. The next day, with Sarah and the girls safe in the hospital, the search for Tom continued. Days later, they found him deep in the woods, resting against a tree. He was alive but weak from cold and hunger. He had hurt his leg while searching for help, but had kept moving as best he could. When the rescuers found him, he smiled faintly and whispered, "I knew you'd come." Tom was reunited with his family in the hospital, and though it took weeks for them all to recover fully, they eventually healed. Their story became one of hope and courage, a reminder that even in the darkest, coldest places, love and determination could light the way home. And high up in the trees of Pine Ridge Mountain, the wildlife cameras continued to click away, silent witnesses to the small miracles that sometimes happen in the wild. The Martin family loved being outside. Tom, Sarah, and their twin daughters, Emma and Ella, liked to go on adventures. They loved to walk in forests, climb hills, and find pretty places in nature. One weekend, they decided to go to Pine Ridge Mountain. They had been there once before and wanted to explore more. The weather looked perfect when they arrived. The sun was shining, the sky was blue, and the air was cool and fresh. Before starting their hike, they took a happy family photo. Everyone was smiling. The big snowy mountain stood behind them. Emma wore a yellow jacket, and Ella wore a purple one. They each carried a little backpack filled with snacks and water. Their parents carried a map and a compass to stay safe. The families started walking up the trail. They laughed and talked as they walked. Other hikers saw them and smiled because they looked so happy. Everything seemed fine. But later in the day, the weather started to change. Dark clouds came over the mountains. The wind became cold. Tom and Sarah wanted to reach their camping spot before it got dark, so they hurried. No one knows exactly what went wrong. By night, the Martin family had disappeared. They didn't come back. The next day, people began to search for them. Rangers, friends, and helpers walked the trails, calling their names. Helicopters flew in the sky. Dogs searched the ground. But there was no sign of the family. It was like they had just vanished. Days passed. Everyone felt sad. People whispered about wild animals, accidents, or getting lost. But no one knew for sure. Sarah's sister, Lisa, came to the ranger station every day, hoping for good news. But the rangers had no news to give. 3 weeks went by with no clue. People started to lose hope. Then something amazing happened. One day, a ranger named Mike was checking the wildlife cameras. These cameras were hidden in trees to take pictures of animals. Usually, they captured bears, deer, and birds. But that day, Mike saw something different. In one photo, he saw 3 people walking through the trees. They wore colorful jackets and carried backpacks. Mike zoomed in and gasped. It was Sarah, Emma, and Ella. They looked tired and dirty, but they were alive. Mike quickly called his boss. Everyone got ready for a new search. This time, they had a clue about where to look. A big team of rangers and volunteers rushed to the place where the photo was taken. Snow was falling now, making it harder to see tracks. Still, the team found small signs, broken sticks, a piece of scarf, and tiny footprints. They knew Sarah and the girls were nearby. The mountains were very big and hard to walk through. It was cold and the paths were steep. Even strong hikers could get lost. But now they had hope. They worked fast before it got dark again. They had to find the family soon. Sarah hugged Emma and Ella tightly as they walked through the snowy woods. They were tired, cold, and hungry, but Sarah did not give up. They had been lost for many days. They drank melted snow and ate the little food they had left. Tom had left a few days earlier to find help. He told Sarah he would come back. Every day, Sarah hoped to see him again. Emma held Sarah's hand tightly. Ella walked ahead a little, trying to be brave. Sarah was proud of her daughters. They were only 6 years old, but very strong. Sarah remembered Tom's words. Stay together. Keep moving. I'll find you. She repeated those words in her mind to stay strong. They followed a small stream, hoping it would lead them to help. Some days, they heard helicopters, but the trees were too thick. They saw a bear once and had to hide quietly until it went away. Another time, it snowed hard, and they stayed under a big rock for hours. Sarah told the girls funny stories to keep their spirits up. She made them laugh even when they were scared. One afternoon, Sarah saw something strange on a tree, a small box. It was a wildlife camera. Sarah waved her arms and jumped, hoping the camera would take a picture of them. She prayed someone would find the picture and come to help. She didn't know it yet, but that one moment gave them a new chance. The rescue team worked very fast after they saw the photo. They followed the footprints and broken sticks. It was cold and their feet hurt, but they kept going. They shouted into the trees. As the sun began to set, someone saw a flash of red through the trees. It was Sarah's jacket. The team ran forward. Sarah and the girls came into view. They were shivering and crying, but alive. The rescuers wrapped them in warm blankets and gave them food and water. Sarah was so tired she could hardly talk. She asked, "Did you find Tom?" The rescuers shook their heads. They had not found him yet. They promised to keep looking. Sarah and the girls went to the hospital to get better. A few days later, the search team found Tom. He was far away, resting under a tree. He was cold and hurt, but alive. When he saw the rescuers, he smiled weakly and said, "I knew you would come." Soon, Tom and his family were together again. They spent weeks in the hospital getting stronger. Their story became famous. People talked about their bravery and love. Everyone agreed. The Martin family showed that even when things seem very bad, hope and love can help you survive. And high in the trees of Pine Ridge Mountain, the wildlife cameras kept taking pictures, ready to capture more stories of survival and hope.